Everyone is welcome at this book club. So please always share that email that you get from us that lets you know what's coming up next month. It's great fun to see a friend who lives across the country or nearby that you can't normally see when you come onto this book club. So share it with them. But to be honest with you, only Gwinnett County Public Library card holders are able to access the unlimited number of ebooks that we purchase to support this book club so that you do not have to buy the book. But everyone is welcome. They can purchase their own books or they can pay for an out-of-county library card for the cost of one hardcover book. And then they can always get their books for free or access any of the rest of our services. To sign up for these events, you simply need to email events@gwinnettpl.org if you would like to, or join the library's meetup page. If you will now help me move your cursor along the bottom of your page and click on that chat button. I want to show you what's in the chat for you already. The first thing is the name and email address of our bookstore partner. They have copies of this book in stock. It is a brand new, Emily will be showing it to you, a brand new illustrated edition, and it's gorgeous. So there it is. Perfect. It's just absolutely lovely. Those books are in stock at Eagle Eye Bookshop, and if you mention the library, they will ship them to you for free. So that is an excellent deal. You will also see in the chat box a link to find out who all the authors are that are coming in February and March. In addition, there's also a link to our YouTube channel. So this is being recorded, and in about 3 weeks after it's edited and sound is added to it, it will be available on our YouTube channel. And you don't need to worry unless you are speaking and you have your camera on. The recording only records the face of those who are talking. It does not record the chat box. So if you're uncomfortable at all, I wanted to let you know that. But a lot of times these talks get far more views when they're not live, to be honest with you. Okay, and then finally down at the bottom, I mentioned the library's author meetup page, and there if you sign up for that, you would get a reminder of next month's book club as well as any author that's coming. And then on there, if you choose to RSVP, yes, it instantly sends you the link. You don't have to go looking. So there's our guest host, Emily Robinson, and her baby, which she will introduce to you in just a moment. That's Holly. We may hear from her when things being what they are with this method of communication. Okay, housekeeping notes really quickly. Again, if you move your cursor at the bottom of the page, you can opt to turn your camera on or off. If you're super shy and you don't want to unmute and answer questions that Emily poses or ask Emily questions, that's no problem. You can do so in that chat box. If there's something you want to say to me, you want to complain, you want to give a compliment, you can just communicate directly with me. Again, the chat box is there. Next month's book is The Queen's Gambit, which is right now a Netflix series, and it's excellent. So I'm really looking forward to reading that book. And there's a lot to talk about with there in that book. So tonight's guest host is Emily Robinson. She has extensive experience teaching this book to her students. She loves it, has read it many times, and she is a DeKalb County public school system teacher. She has a master's in education and is an NEA Foundation Global Learning Fellow. And she is a TLAB program scholar at Oxford University. Very impressive, I think. So Emily, unmute yourself and please tell us why you love teaching this book.
Hi there, how's everybody doing? Thanks for tuning in tonight. Yeah, so you saw Holly. You might hear her bark once or twice. I'm currently teaching all my classes on Zoom right now, so she's a regular guest star on that. So I tell the students, at least you know you're in the right Zoom class when you hear her loud mouth going. So hopefully she won't bark very much, though. She's pretty used to this routine by now because we've been doing it almost a year now, you know. So I've got the Great Gatsby for you all. This is a really cool new edition here. And you see the green light on there. Okay, very, that was actually the first thing I noticed because it's super bright. And it's called, it's like an illustrated edition, and it's illustrated by Adam Simpson. And there's some really neat illustrations in here. Like this was a good one I saw right here. You can see Gatsby's yellow car there in the city. I thought that was really neat. And then there was, let's see, there's another one. Oh yeah, here. Okay, with hopefully you've read the book, so hopefully I'm not giving anything away. Gatsby, being murdered. Here he is floating in the pool. So there's some really, really interesting pictures in here, and definitely gives it a new perspective. Like here you can see the city. Setting is very important in this story. You really couldn't have the story without that setting there in New York in the Roaring 20s. And so I've taught the book countless times. I've lost track. I've also watched both movies countless times as well. My students love the movies. So we're going to talk about the movies as well if you want to. I'm not sure if you all have seen, well, by both versions, I mean the 1970s version and then the 2013 version. There was another movie, I think it came out in like 2000. It was not good at all. Like, I do not recommend that one. Don't waste your time. But the 1970s, the Robert Redford and the Leonardo DiCaprio, both really wonderful. And they're both very different from one another. And I think that they go great together. And I definitely recommend, especially if you haven't seen the newer one. My students just go wild for it. So I guess I just wanted to start out with, well, I usually start out with my students talking about bigger ideas like what is the American dream? And like, what is its origin? And do you think that the American dream is that possible to attain for every person? Is that something that's open to every American? So does anybody want to speak on that?
I sure don't think so. How about you? I see Merwin's got an opinion.
I'd like to think it's available to everyone. It was the tone of the book to me is this is actually the 5th time I've tried to read it. I gave up the first 4 times because by chapter 2 I felt the characters were so despicable that I didn't care what happened to them.
Yeah.
But I think the American dream is alive. I think you can achieve it, but I don't think these people were ever going to achieve it.
They think that they have it, though. That's the thing.
Yes, they do think they have it, and they're really very, except for Nick, the narrator, they're really very hollow people, and I thought that Fitzgerald did a very good job of describing Daisy and forgetting the golfer's name all of a sudden. Jordan and her husband as, he almost paints them as clouds with no substance. That's one of the things I finally this time learned to like about the book was his almost poetic style of writing.
Well, you brought up so many ideas there. Style, character, the American dream. Definitely, you hit on a lot of great ideas, and it's almost overwhelming because the book is so good, and there are so many angles you can attack. But yeah, definitely like the characters are a big thing, the setting, and then also about American dreams, and not just the American dream, but also just dreams in general, because we know that Gatsby's dream was to finally somehow figure out how he was going to get Daisy. And then he did finally do it, at least somewhat, but he didn't have her completely, so he wasn't happy enough with that. So it really shows, like you were saying, how hollow not only the characters, but their dreams end up being as well. Yeah. Does anybody else want to speak about, dreams and the American dream, and do you think it's available and open to every person?
I would, Miss Emily. I think what's so interesting and fascinating about the book is, and I think this is what we can really hit home with our students, So Jay had this image in his head. He had his perfect American dream, but it was for him an unattainable one, right? Bounce higher, right? And he's bouncing as high as he can. And he literally made this palatial estate for her directly across the sound. But it doesn't matter how high he bounces. What we find in the end is when you put your American dreams on things you can hold and touch and that are all that glitter, the glitter and the gold, it all just falls through your hands. And so the idea of this amazing American dream, like he always had it, but it didn't matter how many things he built, he had Daisy, but only for a fleeting moment. And truly we learn what the American dream really is or is not. And then to your point of, can everyone attain it? No. And we have certainly seen that. I mean, the pandemic has certainly shown us how the American dream is not attainable for all people, and the inequity that's happening across the nation. Voter suppression is part of a dream, and look what's happening, right? Like if you can't engage, you can't have the dream. And when we suppress you and don't let you engage in the dream, well, you don't get to have it. So no, the American dream should be for all, but it's not. And we're learning that more and more, I think, in 2020 and 2021.
Oh, that's interesting that you brought it into, even things with coronavirus. I never thought of doing that, but that's an awesome idea. Yeah, that's interesting. Does anybody else want to speak about dreams?
I think part of the problem with Gatsby's attaining the dream is he gave all, to me, it seemed like he gave up all sense of personal integrity in order to strive to get into that social class he wanted to be in. He was a bootlegger. He hung around with the criminal element.
Mm-hmm.
I think his dream for Daisy would have never been attainable, but maybe he could have achieved personal success if he'd maintained some sense of his integrity.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's anybody's dream to grow up to be a bootlegger and to hang out with gangsters. I don't think anybody really aspires to that when they're little, or I don't think anybody's parents wants their child to grow up to be like that. And so, he wanted to cheat, and he wanted to get to the top as fast as possible and to get the dream. But, what was so sad, like it says in the book, is that, it was never really going to be open to him anyway. So he really shouldn't have even bothered, which is a very pessimistic attitude. I understand that, and it's definitely evidenced in, his brutal murder and, what happens afterwards. But it shows you how, how his dream, like you were saying, it was empty, and there wasn't really anything behind it because he had to cheat to get there. And even when he did get there, almost, he still wasn't pleased and happy. He was still displeased about what was going on, and he wanted to kind of go back in time and live in the past, but that wasn't really possible. Like, he's definitely not a very modern person. He lives in the past.
But Emily, don't you think that there are plenty of parents who would be fine if their child was able to reach that level of success? And if they had to cheat, steal, lie, and scrap to get there, it's just all in the name of the game. And then ultimately, when they have that thing that looks like their American dream, right? That car or that wife or that estate, then how you got there may or may not really, whatever. The parents look to push their children above what they had. And so that's their American dream. And if you have to, hang out with some gangsters, do a little bootlegging to get there, right? I mean, I think that there are some people who, and I'm from New York, so I grew up with these people. The people that were in the mafia, like whatever, you just are like, whatever. I mean, you knew the things that they had to do, but it didn't take away from their reputation, or it didn't take away from what they had, right? Because they had the cars and the shoes, and we didn't think about how they got there. We just saw what they had. And that's what people are looking for, something to hold and attain. And ultimately, of course, that leads to Gatsby's great demise.
Yeah, certainly that would be, he's really the antithesis of people like Henry David Thoreau. If you all are familiar with transcendentalism and how he said, sell your clothes and keep your thoughts. He, don't bother yourself to buy superfluous things because you don't need that. So he would definitely be the exact opposite of somebody like Daisy, for example, or like Jordan or Tom. And so, that's also interesting to kind of put up against that as well. But I kind of getting off the topic there a bit. But that is sad, that people are, and actually Thoreau does address that as well. He says that it's sad that people feel so desperate and will do such desperate things in order to attain that level that they think they need, when they don't, in fact, need that, and that they shouldn't worry about it. But, people put so much pressure on themselves and on other people, like what you were saying, Danielle, that it's really disappointing.
I know.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to be sure, one of our guests is having trouble with their video, but they wanted you to say, sorry about not having video, but I would like to add that I don't think Gatsby is trying to get the American dream. He's trying to impress Daisy and show her he can give her the life she is accustomed to. That is his total focus. It's all about lost love. That's
Yeah, I guess his dream was just getting her. And I guess if he was going to get her, what he would have to do is to get that so-called American dream, and then that would make her happy. But I'm not sure if that's really what he wanted for himself personally. But I guess he was willing to do whatever it took in order to get there, even if it meant, cheating and lying and getting there, but with illicit means and stuff.
And Sean texted Emily, be careful what you dream of. This man got his riches, but look what happened. Be careful.
Exactly.
Right. Be careful what you ask for. And I actually thought the same thing. What I thought was really cool was reading this book in, say, high school or as a 20-something. I see it entirely differently now. That's why it's so, one of the reasons I think it's so a perpetual bestseller 100 years later. I looked at him as incredibly immature and thought, wow, what a tyke, what's he want her for? She's kind of a mess. And I didn't find him inspiring at all. In fact, I struggled to like the person. There were some gems where he behaved very well, but overall I thought, what a chump.
That's what Merwin was saying, about how he almost threw it away. He was like, I don't want to have to read these characters anymore because they're awful people. They're all like, there's very few, redeeming qualities about any person in this whole book, even if they're only in it for like a little bit. Like Meyer Wolfsheim, we barely hear anything from here, but we know that he's some kind of gangster too. So everybody is awful. They're all terrible people.
Yeah.
Except maybe the husband George, I think it's George who kills.
Yeah.
I mean, he at least seemed like a human being,
He was the most sympathetic character in the book.
Yeah, deeply flawed, unfortunately, too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in her own way, Daisy was just as evil as Gatsby and her husband.
Yeah. Well, what about the narrator, though, Emily? I thought there was a lot to like about him. I forgot the moment.
Yeah, he's okay. Like I don't know, he's just kind of there for me. He doesn't really bring a lot of warm fuzzies. Let's just say that. There's no warm fuzzies anywhere in this book. Except, who I do actually, one person probably would be Mr. Gatz, Jay's father. I forgot about him. Yeah, he's actually probably the one redeeming character in the whole story because, you do feel sorry for him when you hear his story. Did you like him, Denise?
Yeah, yes, I did, but and as a parent, I can certainly see where you want to see the best of your child. and I see that his ending place, now that his son is dead, is to sort of lift his son up. I thought he was a little bit too positive about what he thought.
Oh yeah, he didn't live in reality.
Right, but then again, his son is dead, and so idealizing people who have passed is a kind of a common human.
Exactly.
You know, so-and-so will talk about their husband was just on a pedestal and, you know, they're gone now. And I would think, gee, you had a lot to say about what you didn't like before he died.
But bringing it back to Nick, like you were saying, you know, he's very much underrated and he does fly under the radar. And I do get a bit frustrated because I want to know more about Nick and like what's his story, but he so rarely talks about himself, which is really interesting. And so Denise sent me a link that's from the BBC, and it was talking about how the copyright has expired. So now you're going to start seeing all these like new crazy versions of Great Gatsby and zombies or whatever, and vampires and stuff. So there's going to be a new mini series coming out on TV. And then there's also going to be a novel. I think it's just called Nick. Is that right, Denise? Yeah. And it's going to be like his backstory, because every time I feel like it so often happens in the book, like Nick drops some bombshell out of nowhere. Like, oh, I actually am engaged to this person. Oh, but I cheated on this person. Oh, I'm 30. Today's my birthday. And, you know, it's like, wait, where is this even coming from? It just drops out of the sky. And that makes him, a lot of my students really question Nick when we talk about him, because he is so weird and random and he doesn't talk about himself. So they tend not to trust him. So they don't really know exactly if he is a good narrator. So they kind of doubt the whole story sometimes.
Oh, that's really brilliant though, that you have them thinking that way, because that's a wonderful life skill to trust everything people trust, but verify other human beings. But I'm really proud of them that they have the maturity to even doubt the narrator. And I hope that expands to when they look at Facebook or the internet.
I hope so. That's what I'm trying to tell them, you know, and I'm hoping that those skills can translate into other areas of their lives.
Absolutely. In the chat box, again, one of our guests is having some difficulty, but I think it's Lois. She says, Nick says about himself, everyone suspects at least one of the cardinal virtues, and this I am one of the few honest people that I have ever known. And
yeah, I love that. That's my students go crazy when they read that. They're like, wait a minute, like he just told a big lie and now he's like saying he's the most honest person. It doesn't make any sense. And like that's at the very end of one of the chapters, I think, right? I think like
I'm not sure. She would have to tell you. She particularly, she'll probably type in.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah, it's at the end of chapter 3. It's like the last sentence in chapter 3. So he really like, right? As he just finishes talking about how he, you know, has some girlfriend or maybe he's engaged and he has to write a letter back to her, like breaking up with her and all this stuff. And then he's like, oh, I'm one of the few honest people I have ever known. Like right after he talks about how, and then he talks about how Jordan Baker is incurably dishonest. And I'm like, well, you sound like you're being a bit hypocritical, Nick.
Yeah.
After I finally finished reading this, I went and searched out some reviews and some essays on Gatsby, and one of the things that surprised me was one of these authors and was speculating that an allusion to homoeroticism between between Mr. McKee and Nick, and it's just a brief line or two near the end of the second chapter, after Tom breaks his girlfriend's nose, and I had to, after I read this, I had to go back and read that chapter again. That's just not the way I read that section of the book.
Yeah, I don't, if they're having some kind of deal going on, it doesn't matter to me, but it is, It's very much like shrouded in mystery, and there's so few words. Like, I mean, this book is so short. There's just no time to really get into all of that. And that's something, pretty much like this book, since it is so short, every word counts. And if you miss something, if you blink, you're going to miss something really big. Like what you just talked about. Somebody could definitely just completely gloss over that and miss some kind of another bombshell,
You know what part I can never get over in that part of the chapter is who is going to take care of that puppy that they pulled out of the street?
Yeah, I know.
Like, I'm always like, who's going to take care of the dog? And I'm always so stuck on that. And my students are always like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the dog.
Yeah,
Who's
the
gonna take care of the dog?
That's a good point. I mean, they don't even live in that apartment. It's just like where they go to hook up.
Right. Yeah. It's just their side place. So I need to know who's taking care of the dog.
There's another book there.
Yeah, there could be. It's a spinoff.
Yeah, but Merwin, the man's dead, so it'll have to be somebody else, right?
Yeah, and again, I think that's a great example, though, Danielle, of how Nick talks about how careless they are. All of them are so careless. Like, that's a perfect example. Oh, let's just buy a puppy for the afternoon and then just give them away when we go home. That's probably what they ended up doing.
Yeah, you got to think like they had it, and then they were done with the afternoon. They just let it off the train.
Yeah,
in
I
the
can see
Valley
that
of
totally.
Ashes.
I know that's what happened. That poor thing.
Like those blue dogs that are near Chernobyl now that we're all seeing those pictures on social media of those dogs that are blue. Like this dog, like he's just gray from the Valley of Ashes. He's just gonna live there forever. So yeah.
Absolutely, I can definitely see that happening. I guess that's why he included it in the book. I think, and how he just kind of leaves that open. Because then people like Danielle are like, but what about the dog?
But it speaks to their carelessness, right? Like it's one more thing they can take and discard, right? It's just like, and then because that morning turned into the afternoon turned into night. Like it's just nothingness to them, all of it. And well, where does Daisy think her husband is? Like, where is he? Where is he? Just went into the city randomly, like, and he's just infinitely.
He doesn't even try to hide the fact that he's sleeping around. He doesn't.
She calls during dinner. So.
Yeah, like he's proud of it.
Right. But that just speaks to the whole, and that's the American dream, like, look, in America, you can grab a puppy off the street. It's like, what?
It happens at shelters every Christmas.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yep. Dogs are put in the witness protection program all the time. I mean, I know that. It's just, but I'm an animal person. It's always.
Oh yeah, me too.
Always breaks my heart. So.
But also they said it's some kind of, they also don't even know what kind of dog it is either. They say it's like a German Shepherd or something.
That speaks, I think, to, that melting pot thing. And then of course he's like, well, she's a bitch. Well, of course it's a bitch.
Yeah, that dog is a bitch.
That is overtly, like, this is what I think of women. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to pretend I'm talking about the dog.
Of course, my students go wild whenever we read that. Oh, you said that B word. Oh, I'm like, it's okay. I was quoting. It's a quote. It's okay.
Okay, and our friend in the chat box who can't communicate otherwise is saying, but in the end, she is crying over the leash. Why? Is the dog alive?
Okay, let's go to the book then. Okay, was that after she nose broken?
Yeah, isn't she crying because her nose is broken? There's gushing blood everywhere? Maybe not.
Ah.
Here, let's see.
And while you're looking, I want to share that ITV and A&E are going to do a mini series to update and explore the female characters.
Oh, yeah.
Because they lack dimension. And they're working with Fitzgerald's great granddaughter in the production of it. I did think that was interesting and want to share that.
I'm excited for that because they're right. The female characters are so underdeveloped in this book. Like, come on.
Is there anything to develop, or were they just that shallow?
You got that right. They're all shallow.
Yeah.
I don't see that part. Like, I know what you're talking about with her and the dog leash, but I cannot find it. I don't know what section it's at. Does anybody know?
Maybe she can put it in the chat box.
Yeah.
Oh, page 158. She's right on the beam. That lady is on the beam.
Oh, which version though?
Oh, well, that's true. That's true, right? There's so many of them. I had those covers up earlier.
Yeah, I have this one. I don't know what version
Me
y'all
too.
have.
Chapter 8, she says.
Okay, yeah, it's at the end. Is this
No, there
when?
it is. Yeah, it is on page 158.
Okay, and this version here. Is this probably when he's talking about how she used to cry?
Oh yeah, she had a wrapped in tissue paper.
You know, Myrtle is a very emotional person, certainly, and so I think that I think that also he wanted, like when Fitzgerald wrote about Myrtle, he made her very emotional and also like local, like of the lower class as well. And I think that he was trying to kind of put that on the lower classes being too emotional, and not being able to control themselves. So I think that was another thing too.
Oh wow.
That's an interesting observation. Yeah.
Because that wasn't like a very desirable trait, and that's something actually that's really missing from this story is like those true emotions and like really truly caring about somebody. The only person I think would be Mr. Gatz, who actually like really cared for somebody.
Well, and there was the restaurant owner, and I forget his name. That
Michaelis.
Not Michaelis. That was taking care of Mr. Wilson after Myrtle was killed. And
that's true.
When I'd never gotten that far into the book before, but he's one of the few people in the book that actually seemed to maybe be a caring person.
Yeah, that's true. And he's definitely like a super minor character. So
Yeah.
we just get a little bit from him, and then we get some from Mr. Gatz, another minor character. But in terms of other emotions, I don't really see them. No. Which is unfortunate.
They do kind of fill out the story, though. It wouldn't be the same without them.
Yes, I do like minor characters can change, the entire story sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Emily Bo wants to know, do you think that Daisy is in any way a bit of a caricature of Fitzgerald's wife? Because she was pretty spoiled and pampered when you talk about her. But do you think that there's any of her Zelda's story in here?
Yes, I think so. I don't know as much about, his personal life as I do about the actual book, but, certainly it's The Great Gatsby follows a lot of Fitzgerald's own life. A lot of it almost just exactly like his life. But, you say that you should also write about what you know. But certainly like they were like that, the power couple or like the wild couple that you would always want to come to your party. Because when they got there, you knew that things were about to get real, and like lampshades on the heads, and like staying up all night, dancing, crazy stuff. And so, certainly they followed that because he came from a super like lower middle class background, and always wanted to be better than what he was given in life, and aspired for that. And he aspired for somebody like Zelda, just like Gatsby aspires for Daisy,
Yes.
and never really was able to live up to that image and always kind of had that inferiority complex going on and felt insecure next to their women, obviously, or else you wouldn't have seen what happened with Gatsby. And then I know like Fitzgerald always felt like a bit of a failure. And like I know Great Gatsby wasn't really popular at all until like the 1960s, and he kind of thought he was like a failure, but he was writing to sustain their lifestyle.
I read that what really kind of made the book take off, that the initial sales were kind of miserable, but it was chosen by the military and issued to soldiers going overseas during the Second World War.
That's so random.
Yeah, and it's just that so these soldiers coming back from Europe after the Second World War had all been exposed to Gatsby.
That's so random. I never would have thought that.
Because I was if I can find the reference where I saw that, I'll send it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that's
I'll send it to your mother and she can get it to you.
yeah, that's so interesting. You know, certainly men definitely like this book. My students, the guys always want to be Gatsby. And the girls oftentimes love him too, because he, and sometimes I'll say it myself, he's good looking, rich, and a one woman man. So it's like, what that's the whole package. Like so they're looking for everyone.
Comfortable enough to wear pink suits.
Exactly. Yeah. And, he's secure in his masculinity. That's another thing. He's not afraid to wear a pink suit. Yeah.
I think it may be misplaced security.
Yes, certainly. But yeah, like I can see how people would like that. Maybe because they did that because Fitzgerald himself was in the military, and the story features military people. Maybe they thought that was a good idea. It was a new kind of like fresh book on the scene, and I'm not really so sure about that. I'm not sure if the world was really quite ready for this when it came out, because it really went over a lot of the critics' heads at the beginning, and then later they realized, oh, actually this is like a genius book. So I'm not sure if the world was quite ready for it, if that makes any sense.
Do you
wondered? Oh, I'm sorry, Merwin. Go ahead.
Do you teach any of Fitzgerald's other books?
There's a short story that I'll teach sometimes. It depends on the class. What is it called? Something dreams, like summer dreams or spring dreams or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's very similar to this in that you've got a kind of two-timing woman who, and this the main character is a caddy at a golf club, and that's how he meets her. And, he aspires to date her and all that. And then it turns out that she's dating, these other people. So it is kind of like this, it's the same sort of concept as this. Like this, I think, is definitely like the fruition of all of his other stories and his short stories, because they do seem to have that same type of theme. But I think this is really the epitome of all of those. Winter Dreams, I think that's what it's called. And that one's a good precursor to reading this one. So we'll read it before.
I wanted to ask a question and see if anybody else saw this. The parties, the extravagant parties that Gatsby gave. I originally thought they were simply to sort of woo her across the lake to come to one of his parties and impress her. But then later realized that perhaps those were opportunities for him to scam wealthy people by selling the bonds he was selling, those counterfeit bonds they're looking for at the end of the book. I wonder if anyone thought that, or thought this was exclusively to impress Daisy.
I don't know. I missed the bond. I missed the counterfeit bonds part.
Yeah, it's easy to miss. It's like what you mentioned earlier. They don't explicitly state it, and you have to really look for it. And I've read the book a million times, and even when you're looking for it, it's still hard to find. So it's like, what exactly is he mixed up with? All we know for sure is like bootlegging, for sure. And then the other stuff is a little bit more mysterious, but we know something illicit is going on for sure.
Yeah, if you watch that second movie, because I was most familiar, given my age, with the one with Robert Redford. Then I did watch, as you recommended, the newer movie. The Bond part is very clear in the end. Why the narrator is burning the bonds that he finds to protect, in a way, to protect Gatsby. I think he called it even a final gift to my friend. I'm going to burn these bonds.
Yeah, certainly they took some liberties with that. There you would see some different interpretations, and then you could get with some critics to try and figure that out, because it is not explicitly stated. You really have to kind of look for it, and then maybe even put your own ideas in there to see what exactly is going on with him. But at the parties, I think that's a good idea, because he is conducting business at parties. We know that. He gets called away during nearly every party to conduct some kind of business. So I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good idea.
Yeah, in Chicago. He's always getting calls from Chicago.
Yeah, or Philadelphia.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah,
assumed
you
they
know,
were
Vermont's
mafia.
up, and that's where everybody is. So Chicago, Philadelphia. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
I mean, Fitzgerald's is just like, here, let's stereotype. You know, it's not like he's getting calls from Baton Rouge or like Des Moines or Colorado Springs. You know, that's what's happening.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
And you know, when you think about it, if I'm not mistaken, Daisy was from St. Louis. Well, you don't really
Midwest.
you don't really
Louisville.
or
Louisville.
Louisville,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you don't really picture Louisville as being where high society is going to be. You know, to set
No.
her to make
Isn't that
her
where the big
Louisville,
race is, the horse thing? Been there.
well,
Yeah,
just the Kentucky Derby.
yeah, you know, so there's got to be money there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
guess
think-
I guess in
There is,
their
yeah.
world he was. I guess, you know, in their universe that was a big deal.
and I think it's a nod to old money too.
Yes.
Like very gracious and, you
Right.
know, in Louisville and this very, just a nod to old money. And all the girls were very,
Yeah,
you know, wanting to be Daisy and wanting
traditional. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it is important it's set in a traditional place. I think that's a great point.
You know, this is kind of off subject and I don't want to distract us, but I kind of felt that the settings, the setting was like a character, was almost a character. There's a lot of talk about being a Midwesterner versus being an Easterner. And in the end, you know, he declares, I got to go home. I'm just a Midwest boy. And, you know, Tom was a Midwesterner. Most of them were Midwesterners,
Mhm.
not Easterners. And so I really thought that to me was interesting. And I recall when I met my soon-to-be husband's friends in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they all had a real big preconception about what I was like and told me so, because I was a Yankee from Massachusetts. And it just shocked me. And I thought, really? Well, I don't have a preconception about what you Midwesterners are like, except that you've got that wonderful accent that makes a really great TV
Yeah.
moderator. But I really felt you know, East Egg versus West Egg, the East versus the West of the United States was a fascinating thing to look at.
I kind of
Yeah. Go ahead, Merwin.
felt that way when I left Minnesota to start working in the South, that there were certain things that were expected of me before people even had spent any time with me, just because I was from Minnesota. It's almost like the way we treat people from West Virginia. You know, they're just a bunch of uneducated hillbillies. Well, those uneducated hillbillies have a hell of a lot more common sense than most of the nation.
Yeah. In the
Yeah.
chat box, Bo would like you to talk about the meaning of the artwork, this beautiful artwork on the cover, which I did get excited about it myself and went to see this artist's other work. And this is considered the best book cover ever printed in the United States by some people who love covers. I wondered if you would talk a little bit about what the meaning is of the green tier and the cover.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. You know, you were talking about setting. You know, on this, you see the bright lights here of New York City and like all of the glitter and the glitz and the glam that New York City supposedly can offer you. But on top of that, you've got somebody who is crying. So you know that it's not going to be a great time. And you know that there's going to be a price that you have to pay in order to, you know, have this fun or whatever. And then I also like, it's kind of hard to see because, but you can see how she's wearing, what are those kind of hats called that they wore in the 1920s? You know how the women would wear those like kind of flat looking hats when they would go dancing and stuff, when they'd go out. Can you see that on her head? So that's something too that it's hard to see unless you really look closely. Does anybody know what those kind of hats are called?
Flapper hats.
It's just a flapper hat. Okay, yeah, that works for me. Yeah, that works. And then also how you see how the person's kind of fading away and is also a bit empty, like Maureen was saying earlier about hollow, empty. I'm not sure if there's a lot going on, but then maybe there is, since there's a tear. And we were talking about emotions earlier, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of emotions in this story. But here we've got at least a single teardrop. I don't know, that could be coming from somebody like Myrtle, because she's always being like overly emotional. I'm not sure if she really is even meaning to be that way when she is emotional. But yeah, this is such a great cover. And in this
I
cover,
love the eyes. Oh yeah, please do show them the new one, and then I want to talk about the eyes. That is beautiful book. That's
yeah, it is
book,
really
everyone.
beautiful.
That is available from Eagle Eye Bookshop. They have brought some copies in if you're interested. What I was just disgusted with myself after having read the book a couple of times, that this is the first time I noticed the naked ladies in the whites of the eyes.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Somebody's talked to me about that before.
Yeah, I totally missed it. And when I sent you all your monthly reminder, I don't know if you noticed it, but at the top of the email reminder was just those eyes, because I knew you'd recognize them.
Oh yeah, it's iconic.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that amazing? He hid that there, and really, if you don't study it, you don't see the two naked ladies.
And I'm sure Danielle knows about the eyes and what else that can symbolize.
Well, I was actually, I had a different view, and I have always thought this vapid person is crying, but it's green because they're crying money. And so I never was worried about their tears because they have so much money, and it's like, oh, like I broke a nail. There's just this, they're so not attached to reality. I mean, that's why Merwin has ditched this book like 80 times.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, these people suck. I have so much better things to do. But she's crying money like that, and so you really don't like her. So I never felt bad. And also,
I'm just not sure if it's a real tear, I'm not sure.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Like I totally am never like, oh, that's bad that you're sad. I'm not like, whatever, you're crying because something happened that, you lost a polo pony. But what I was looking at was, what I've always looked at is that the bottom to me has always been Coney Island. And it's always been a circus.
Oh, okay.
Because the city is a circus.
Oh, yeah.
Literally a circus. And
these people's lives are a circus.
These people are a circus. And even though, people are trying to float above it, it's still the meat or the grit of it is just, it's a circus. Like it's just the big top, and you have your ringleaders and you have your people and you've got your animals, like just all of it.
And they do talk about going to Coney Island, but they end up not going.
Right. But it's there, like, and the lore of the Bright Lights Big City will always be there. But then take it another level back, Daisy's always his iconic belief of Daisy is always floating above that. So above all the glitz and glamour, no matter what, there's always her ghost, if you will. Right.
See, we took some very different viewpoints on it, and I'm sure there's even more viewpoints out there that are just as good.
But the reflection, for sure, I always thought of it as this person is looking out again at these golden statues, whether it's art or whatever, but it's always something gold is reflected because they're always looking at these beautiful, unattainable things. And she just happens to be, looking at this moment at this voluptuous, beautiful, golden, unattainable thing. So
Go ahead and tell them what you wrote.
I have an off-the-wall question, and I can't remember her name, but is there any hope whatsoever that Tom and Daisy's child will grow up to be somewhat normal?
Yeah, her name is Pammy.
Pardon me?
Her name is Pammy, or Pam, like Pam or Pammy. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, her parents are so awful. And, not only there's with Tom, I mean, he has zero redeeming qualities. I mean, he's sexist, he's racist, he cheats on his wife, he beats up women, he, goes around threatening people all the time. I don't see how this child can be normal.
Well, isn't that pretty much how Daisy was probably raised?
I wouldn't doubt it.
That's an interesting point.
But he also gives her a string of pearls that's valued at, in today's money, it was $350,000 back then. And so I actually did the math somewhere on like with inflation and stuff, because it seemed like that was really what it took to win her over, was having that string of pearls. That was kind of like her, kind of like an engagement ring. Okay. Oh no, that's from, Dan Cody. Oh man, we have to talk about Dan Cody too. I forgot about him. Yeah, his mentor. I forgot about him. But anyway, it's like worth over like $3 million. Okay, here it is. So he gave her a string of pearls valued at $350,000, which is a lot of money today. But with inflation, it would be $3,845,000 for that string of pearls that Tom gave her. So, I mean, nobody's going to say no to that, especially if you live the life that she's lived, like y'all were saying.
Maybe she'll just grow up and take care of the puppy.
I know. I hope somebody out there is taking care of that poor puppy.
But the pearls, that wasn't why she stayed with Tom. She stayed with Tom out of fear that if she didn't, he would expose what she had done.
Are you talking about at the end?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. They both are they're both so deep in it at that point. They're kind of like a tag team. Like they have to stay together now. And so real quick, let's talk about Dan Cody. I totally forgot about him. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad that I was going to like go through this whole thing and not talk about him. So obviously huge influence on Gatsby. That's the reason Gatsby, he went from being Jay Gats to Jay Gatsby. And also because of Dan Cody. Do y'all want to talk about Dan Cody?
Was he real?
Totally.
Yeah, so let's talk about his importance.
Was he real or just made up?
Well, yeah, was it another figment of his imagination, something that he just told people? Who knows? It does seem a bit unbelievable that, Gatsby would manage to save him and his boat on Lake Superior or whatever when there was like a storm. It does seem kind of far-fetched. But yeah, so his importance and story cannot be like understated for sure. Without him, he's the one who made Gatsby into what he is and aspired to be him.
Mm-hmm. And if he isn't real, then, making him real allows Gatsby to pin this behavior on somebody else, right? That's so true. If he's not real, then Gatsby only has himself to blame for the way his life has gone. But, if you can model yourself after this fake boat captain, we know sure. Gatsby doesn't live in reality. So it's so hard to know if he's really real because that just doesn't quite seem plausible that you just happen to be on one of those Great Lakes and there just happened to be a storm, it's very like wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Like, what are you talking about? It doesn't, I don't know. There's something about him but I want him to be real because I need to know Gatsby. Because if I don't believe in Dan, then I have to believe that Gatsby is that evil. And I can't because I'm in love with Gatsby, right?
Like I said,
I'm in love with him.
Rich,
like we all are.
One woman man.
But if Dan isn't real, then I'm in love with a crazy person. That can't be.
I felt sorry for Gatsby, but I thought he was a terrible, terrible person.
Oh yeah, he's
terrible.
And,
I love
and
him.
of all these terrible people, the only one who's going to get punished is poor Mr. Wilson.
Yeah,
I know, that's really tragic.
Yeah,
but that's what happens because the American dream doesn't happen for people who live in the Valley of the Ashes.
That's true. Yeah. There you go. It's not attainable.
It's not attainable. So of course, Mr. Wilson is going to get screwed. He's the low guy on the totem pole.
Absolutely.
That's
Even lower than
America.
Myrtle.
Yeah, right. That's
I
America.
mean, at least Myrtle's having an affair with a rich guy who has the dream.
Yeah, gets her puppy.
Right.
But I mean,
Yeah.
that's the deal. I mean, that's America, right? Because he's at the very bottom of the rung. And if there's anything
true.
that people take away from the story is that that's what you need. You got to be rich, successful, and famous, and that's how you can get off killing people. But Wilson, he didn't have a chance from the beginning.
My favorite line. Go ahead.
I like what you said, Danielle, but yeah, they got away with it, but you wouldn't want to be them, and they have to live with themselves. So to me, they're the biggest losers in the story. Gatsby's dead. I mean, he paid the price. He had an affair and she paid a terrible price. So to me, I think they make out the worst because I don't know how you live with yourself. And I also wanted to say, I think you're younger than me, Danielle, because of my age. No, I am not in love with Gatsby. I would not date the man. I would run really fast from him because he wouldn't do a thing for me because I just don't like who he is.
Well, he has to be alluring on some level, though.
Yeah. Oh, well, if it's Robert Redford, that's off.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
That too, yes, Leonardo DiCaprio. Okay, that's just a physical thing, but I can see beyond that as an older person. It's about quality and who the person is, and I would like to think I would have seen it. But I get that young women, and when I was 20 and saw the movie and read the book, I thought, oh wow.
Oh yeah. Well, my favorite line from the whole book, and especially one of my very favorite lines in like all of literature, and my students love it too, is when Tom and Gatsby, and they're all in the hotel room at the plaza, and they're confronting each other. And Tom says to Gatsby, I suppose the latest thing is to sit back and let Mr. Nobody from Nowhere make love to your wife. Well, if that's it, count me out. I love that line. It's so, and then he talks about how you're like such a hypocrite. Like you're the one who's doing that, like to all these other women, but your wife can't do it. And I love how he capitalizes Mr. Nowhere and he capitalizes nowhere. I thought that was great how Fitzgerald really did that to make you notice that. Like that's a real person, Mr. Nobody from Nowhere. I mean, that is such a slap in the face. Imagine you're Gatsby and you hear somebody like that say that to you. Like that's gotta hurt him so much.
Especially after everything's done, to be Mr. Someone from somewhere.
Exactly.
Like that's his American dream. Like to ultimately be like, oh, of course, yes, Mr. Gatsby, of course, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right? To be Mr. Nobody from nowhere. No, look at me. I have this coin. It says I went to Oxford. I carry it with me.
Oxford, New Mexico.
Look at my coin. You gotta love my coin.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude,
yeah, but it shows you how hollow they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. Emily, you were just absolutely superb and set the bar high. I'm glad.
It was so fun, and I'm so passionate about it. I hope you can see my passion,
Oh, we totally can. And it was a really big treat for us to have you here. And if there's any other books you teach and love, let us know.
Oh, I don't have enough time in the day to tell you that. Like there's just too many.
Absolutely. And Emily Moore says to everyone, great job, Emily.
Another Emily.
Thank you, Danielle.
No,
Sorry,
Danielle Moore. Okay. I was like,
Yes.
who's another Emily?
and as does Bo and Sean. We absolutely we're tickled to have you. Thank you. You did a superb job. Thank you, everyone. I hope to see you next month for the Queen's Gambit. Again, if you're a library card holder, just go to our catalog, click on Queen's Gambit. You can download it for free. There are unlimited copies for the book club of that book or buy your own from Eagle Eye Bookshop. And I wish everyone a lovely evening. Please take good care. And again, thank you so much to Emily Robinson. Yay!
Yay! Great Gatsby.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.